Okay. Oh, for recording. Hi. Hoping I can get the computer to work today. All right, we'll try one more time. Why didn't it work the first time? That's crazy. There's Crosbyton. Cool. I might not be there either. Okay.
It's on.
Good morning, Housewoman Union.
Good. Ms. Thompson?
Yeah.
This is Hunter Neal, and last night I tried to submit my project, but it wouldn't submit, so I sent it to you in a message.
Always when there's a problem, do that. So.
All right, thank you.
I had other people with that same issue. I don't know what's going on, so. Okay. All right. I'm just cleaning. I logged in, and of course, what did I get? It didn't have me on, so I've had to log in again, and it takes about 5 minutes to, all right. Okay. Okay, now I can get into Blackboard. It took me just a second to have that happen. It looks like we have a recording going today. That's good. We're going to do some preparatory stuff for reading Hamlet. Ooh. And that may be what all these messages are about. Let's see. I have 5 unread, so I'm guessing, Hunter, that I had, Crosby 10, did y'all manage to get it to me in an email or a message? There's Alyssa's, okay. There's Hunter, okay. Cameron, all right. I don't know what's going on. I can't, you know, crazy things happening with computers, the internet, all kinds of whacked out stuff, so I'm not going to get too, oh, wait a second. Hold on, I got to go back. Did y'all get PowerPoints? And, well, there's a PowerPoint and 2 Word docs, okay? Answering that question. All right, we watched that one the other day. I don't need that one. Here we go. Let's talk about plot structure of the Shakespearean tragedy. This is going to be totally different from what we saw on Trifles. Trifles was a 1-act play. I don't know if it's ever been done for competition for UIL, but I don't know if it would fly very well. It's not real exciting. Not a lot of big drama in it or anything. I actually had made copies for my 9 o'clock class since I have 3 face-to-face students, so I was preparing to have to maybe show things on the document camera, but that spares up a little. So, the plot structure in Shakespeare is, wow, I certainly made this, I put a lot of text on the page, didn't I? It's going to be some very typical stuff. It's going to actually look like the pyramid of rising action is what's going to happen. So you have the elements, you have is exposition. This is going to sound familiar. Exposition is the general atmosphere, the time, the place, basically all that setting stuff that we need to kind of get into a story. The main characters and the opening conditions of the play. So it sounds like exposition for any type of short story or novel. The exciting force. This is something happens that starts the action of the play going on, and it usually happens in the first act. If you don't catch people's attention in the first act, they're not going to be watching the rest of it. You then have rising action. That's a series of actions, usually covering more than 1 act, and during the rising action, the hero of the play, the protagonist, is the active force trying to make things work out as he or she intended. It doesn't always mean that it's good action. It could be bad action. And if you've ever read Macbeth, you'll find out that that's what's going on. The climax, the 4th element, it's where the protagonist reaches the peak of their power, his or her power, okay? And a distinct change occurs in that individual as well as in the direction of the action. Things begin to go against the protagonist who seems to be following a downward path. And this is specifically for tragedy. Then you've got the falling action. Again, remember the triangle. This also covers several scenes and shows all the ways the main events are going against the main character. At this time, the antagonist, the person who's operating in opposition to the protagonist, begins to rise in power. And the conflict between those two becomes the essence of the play then. And then the moment of final suspense, that's usually found in the 5th act of the play. The moment of final suspense has a particular function in the organization. It is close to the end, and it's more important to the protagonist than it is to the audience. It's the moment when it looks as if the protagonist is going to win. But remember, this is a tragedy, which means that first person, they're going to die. And then catastrophe is the complete downfall of the protagonist, either through death or some other devastating circumstance. If the protagonist is a bad guy, like Macbeth is in that play, or Lear, then the catastrophe will be seen by the audience as a good thing. And so that's that Shakespearean structure. So what I gave you on the 2nd page are basically is a blank page for you to maybe help yourself out with Hamlet. So we would view this. I'm going to come over and let's see. I think I'll go to the document camera. I may have a blank page here I could do something on. Thank you, Henry, one of my students. Well, that was interesting. I hit document camera and it didn't go to it, so I may have to do, let me see. Back to me. Okay, went to the document camera. So view this as that wonderful pyramid, okay? Oh gosh, that's not gonna show. Not with that glare. Oh man. Oh, that's better. Okay, so you've got your pyramid. And so always at the bottom of the pyramid you have the exposition. And that's gonna be Act 1. Oh wow. Is that better? I figure this is better than me trying to draw it on the back, on the board behind me. And then somewhere in here you're gonna have an exciting force. Rising action, because see, as it rises up the pyramid, you have the rising action. We're looking at like Act 2, and that's something else I'll point out to you. When you're dealing with Shakespearean plays, you always use Roman numerals to talk about the acts. And then in Act 3, you will always have the climax in Act 3. Don't think of it as the most emotional part of the play. Think of it as, again, the peak of the protagonist's power. So falling action begins, and notice how the pyramid falls down this side. That's why it's called falling action. The moment of final suspense. That's what this says. Sorry about my handwriting. And then the catastrophe. And this will all be in Act 5. Okay. That's kind of a slanted pyramid, but you know, maybe they were having a bad day.
Miss Thompson,
Yes,
what does
ma'am.
the second to last one say?
Moment of final suspense. And all of this is Act 5. Okay. Falling action would be Act 4. And just to help you guys out, 1 is equal to 1, 2. I don't know how well you know your Roman numerals, okay? Because when you quote from a Shakespearean play, you have to use the Roman numerals. You don't get to say, and you don't have to write act, and you don't have to write scene, and you don't have to write line numbers, okay? Y'all with me on that? So when you see this is the large Roman numeral, that's Act 1. I'll put that over here to help you out. When you see the smaller Roman numerals, which I, a lowercase I, would be scene 1. This would be scene, it helps if I try to be consistent with what I'm doing. Scene 2. See how it's mimicking the 1, the 2, the 3? Scene 3. There's not an S in there, a C in there. IV, lowercase, is equal to scene 4. And then the lowercase v is equal to scene 5. The reason I'm saying this, I actually had a student last year who gave me acts. They were quoting from Hamlet, and they gave me Act 1, Scene 1, but then they wrote the line numbers in Roman numerals also, and which was crazy because you'd have to, it was a girl, what she did, she actually, you can go on the computer and say, what are the Roman, how do you write this number in Roman numerals, and it'll tell you. So if I'm going to quote from Act 1, Scene 3, and then I would go lines 62 through 63. That's how you do parenthetical reference for a play. You have commas in between, but you don't have to say Act 1 when it's a capital I like that. I know, and everybody who's used to Shakespearean plays know that that's act. We know this will be the scene. And then you do the line numbers in regular Arabic numerals. And that's kind of one of those boring things you have to realize, but that's how you quote the plays for Shakespeare. Whether you're writing it for my class or somebody else's class, when you take sophomore college lit, okay? So this is a good time to bring it up when we're talking about the exposition, the exciting force, the rising action, all that, because they occur in those acts. So I hope you've got this down. Isn't that exciting? And because you're going to have to write a research paper over Hamlet, this is to help you out. It won't be super long, but we will be doing one. So that's just basically the normal way in which the action in a play occurs. And it always seemed to bug me when we're talking about the climax, because I always thought it was the most important thing that happens at the end of the movie. End of the movie. That's how we tend to think of stuff like this. It's not. It's in a play. It's specifically, as it says here, where the climax is where the protagonist, the central character, whether he's a good guy or a bad guy or woman, it's where they have, it looks like they're at their greatest power. And so we've got to work with that, okay? Now we've also got specifically a PowerPoint about Hamlet. And you'll notice that I also gave you just a one-page character list to help you out, because there's a lot of characters in Hamlet. It's kind of one of those deals. It's a nice little table that I created. Since I don't spend a lot of time doing that stuff, I was kind of proud of myself. But it just briefly gives you, with the character list, just gives you an idea, because there's a lot of characters. And everybody knows, okay, Hamlet, he's the central character. He's the person suffering the tragedy. But what it does, it kind of gives you, well, that's not what I meant to hit. You think I hadn't been using computers for 30 years. Okay. But it basically tells you who you are. The late King of Denmark, you know how when we say somebody is late and we're not talking about the class, it means they have died. And so this is the late King of Denmark is the ghost of Hamlet. It just so happens that the central character's father's name was Hamlet. So he's like Hamlet the whatever, third, fourth, fifth, sixth. Then you've got King Hamlet's brother, who's now the King of Denmark, which is Claudius. Then you have the Queen of Denmark, the widow of the late King Hamlet, and now married to his brother Claudius. This is what's really interesting. Gertrude marries her brother-in-law within a couple of months of her husband dying. It's really kind of oh, Gertruder. That's interesting. I need to fix my thing here. So your next one then is Hamlet, the Prince of Denmark. He's the son of the late King Hamlet and of Gertrude. Let me get rid of that. That will help. The counselor, the Lord Chamberlain to the king is Polonius. The son of Polonius is Laertes. The daughter of Polonius is Ophelia. The servant of Polonius is Rinaldo. And a friend to Hamlet is Horatio. And these other people are some members of the Danish court: Voltaman, Cornelius, Rosencrantz, Guildenstern, and Osric. And then there's this prince of Norway called Fortinbras. He's kind of like this, it's a subtext, you know. A lot of times stories will have multiple stories going along within it. So remember the term foil, and how the foil is the character who is the opposite of your central character. Fortinbras is a foil to Hamlet, and it shows you maybe how the character should actually be. So that's one of the instances in here. That's who Fortinbras is. He has a story, a subtle story going on in the play that kind of reinforces it. And what's interesting is we're going to watch the Mel Gibson version of Hamlet, but Gibson and the director of it, I'm trying to remember who it was. I'll let you know, because we're going to start watching it Monday. That means you need to have read Act 1 by Monday, I believe. Yeah, no. Oh, yeah, we're ahead of time, so we'll actually be working ahead. That's good. So don't worry. I would suggest you start reading Hamlet right now. And if necessary, you're welcome to purchase a side-by-side translation of, that Shakespeare, No Fear Shakespeare type of thing. You're welcome to buy one of those to help you read it. Instead of trying to read the original Shakespearean English, and this is not even original, this has been modified to reflect more contemporary spellings of words. Begins on page 1112 in your textbook. Though it does sound very old when you listen to it. But I recommend go ahead and start reading it if you get an opportunity. Let's look at the PowerPoint. Oh, I want to save those changes since I have Gertruder in there. Sometimes. Okay. And this will give you some more background about all the individuals and maybe the situation, what's going on, okay? Takes a while to open everything up. Here we go. Maybe. Okay. All right, so appropriately, we have a stage and we have the curtains drawn. Hamlet, by William Shakespeare, and technically, just to give you an idea, it's not just called Hamlet, it's actually Hamlet, Prince of Denmark, okay? But most of the time, when you refer to the play, most people just call it Hamlet. And just one more point, when you're giving the title of a play, because it's of great length, it's going to be italicized, not in quotation marks, so we need to make sure we have that clear. All right, by William Shakespeare. The publication occurs sometime in the first part of the 17th century, which is going to be 1600 or 1601. Do y'all get how centuries work like that? It's a little kind of unusual. Probably first performed in 1602, published in 1603, and appeared in an enlarged edition in 1604. They call those folios, and a folio for us would be like if you had 4 pieces of paper, it's double-sided this way, double-sided this way. So it's a big document, and they're kind of interesting to look at. It's almost like you have this huge map, and that would be a folio edition. Now, what we've got here is we've got a map of Scandinavia, and so our setting is what's important. The story takes place in the country of Denmark, which is over here, right here, the purple, okay? In the late medieval period. The story. Shakespeare rarely made up his stories. He always found something in history or something that from someone else that he rewrote to suit himself. So this is a true story of a Danish prince whose uncle murders his father, marries his mother, and claims the throne. The prince pretends to be feeble-minded to throw his uncle off guard, then manages to kill his uncle in revenge. Now, the word feeble-minded means crazy, right, if you're curious. It's a fancy term for that. Hamlet, here's our young Dane, the title character and the protagonist. At the time of the play, he's 30 years old, which seems kind of interesting. He is the son of Queen Gertrude and the late King Hamlet, and the nephew of the present King Claudius. And if you're the 30-year-old son of the king, the logical conclusion is the next person to be king would be you. So somehow his uncle, stepfather, has managed to usurp the throne from Prince Hamlet after the death of his father. Kind of interesting. Which could create some other tension and can also be a research paper if you wanted to write it. Okay. So then we have a little bit more about him. He is melancholy, which means sad. He's kind of emo would be the term we would use now to talk about Hamlet. He's bitter, he's cynical, he's full of hatred for his uncle's scheming and disgust for his mother's sexuality. The play, the movie version with Mel Gibson really plays up this kind of passionate relationship between Gertrude and Claudius. He is an emo guy. He's reflective, he's thoughtful. He studied at the University of Wittenberg. He's sometimes indecisive and hesitant, but at other times he acts rashly and impulsively. Now we have Claudius. That would be his uncle, stepfather. And he is very ambitious. He's calculating. He's a politician, driven by his sexual appetites and his lust for power, which tend to parallel frequently. It seems like one of the greatest downfalls for men in politics when they gain that type of power, or where they're, even if it's power in the business world, is that that power translates itself not only into your business, but also into your sexual relationships. And so it's kind of it's good to know that it's been that way since the beginning. I mean, you know, apparently men have always used power to gain access to whatever they want. We do see some human emotion displayed by Claudius. He does feel some guilt, And he does have love for Gertrude, and they seem to be true. Oh, sorry, gonna sneeze. Sorry about that. I didn't mean to hit the back button. Gertrude. This is Hamlet's mom. She's recently married to Claudius. She loves her son powerfully, but she tends to be shallow. She's a weak woman, and she apparently needs a man in her life to tell her what to do, I guess. She's more interested in affection than being truthful or taking the high moral ground. Polonius is that advisor to the king. He is he is in the play to give us some humor. He's pompous, conniving old man. He's the father of Laertes and Ophelia. He's got this whole thing about he thinks he's really smart and he likes to give advice and he likes to hear himself talk. That's a lot of what's going on with Polonius. Horatio, I don't know why he has a lute in this picture, but he's Hamlet's close friend. He's like his best bud. They studied with him at the university. He's loyal and helpful, and after Hamlet's death, Horatio is the only one who remains alive to tell Hamlet's story. It's like Melville's Moby Dick. You don't know the story of the big whale hunt if you don't have somebody survive it. So as Ishmael survives Moby Dick, Horatio has to survive to let the world know the story of Hamlet, or else we wouldn't have gotten it. And that's kind of a bit contrived, but it also is, it makes sense. How would we know the story if somebody hadn't been able to pass it on? Next up is going to be Ophelia. She is the other female character in the play, and she's going to turn out to be a beautiful young woman who Hamlet has been in love with. This is his girlfriend. She's sweet and innocent, and she obeys her father and her brother Laertes. And so for contemporary women, the way Ophelia and Gertrude behave is a little bit off-putting, because I don't think we would have the same reaction to the situations that she has. But, I guess she's the emo girl equivalent of Hamlet in a way. She expects the men in her life tell her how she's supposed to behave. And now, most of you girls, if your brother told you to behave a certain way, would you pay attention to him? Come on, ladies, would you really? Right? None of you, right? And a lot of times, if your dad tells you something, you wouldn't pay attention to him either. You're at that age where, yes, I'm independent. I don't need people to tell me what to do. Yet Ophelia's close to you in age, and figure she could be anywhere between 17 and 25 age-wise in this play. So the younger she is, the more likely she would be influenced by her father. But in that day and time, they didn't have a whole lot of there weren't a lot of things you could do if you were a young woman that day of certain social standing. It's not like you can go out and get a job. You embroider. You arrange flowers. She's very maidenly, though there is some question that if she's still a maiden. She sings songs about flowers and finally drowns in the river amid the flower garlands she's gathered. Basically, Hamlet's behavior in the play drives her crazy. And Laertes, this is her brother, looks like an old chubby man, and Polonius' son, and he spends much of the play in France. In fact, the play begins and he's asking permission to go to France. I don't understand why any young man would want to leave Denmark and the castle at Elsinore and go to France. Would you want to go to Paris, or would you rather stay at home? Paris, Elsinore, Paris, Elsinore. Of course why would a young man want to go to France? Any ideas? Alec, any ideas why a young man would want to go to Paris?
It's Paris. Who doesn't want to go to Paris?
I mean, shoot, even with the threat of terrorism, I wouldn't mind going to Paris. What are you going to have in Paris? Good food, beautiful women, probably a lot of partying. It's like a permanent spring break for Laertes. So it makes sense. And so one of the humorous scenes we get early on is Laertes giving his son advice about what he should and shouldn't do in Paris. And then he doesn't trust him, so he sends a spy, Rinaldo, to keep an eye on him while he's there. So he's one of those nice, trusting fathers. But Laertes is also a foil for Hamlet because he does act, he's very passionate and quick to action, and Hamlet is not. It takes Hamlet 5 acts to figure out what the heck he's going to do about the situation with his father and his mother and his stepfather. Fortinbras, then, he is the young prince of Norway, whose father is also named Fortinbras, so then you can see more similarities between him and Hamlet. Hamlet's father's name is Hamlet. Fortinbras is, I can't even get this out. So both of them are princes expected to inherit after their fathers dies. Actually, both of them have uncles who take the throne in their place, because when we first get our first really description of what's going on with Fortinbras, it's because Claudius is having to write a letter to his uncle about his behavior, because he's been kind of threatening Denmark. He wants to attack him basically to avenge his father's honor, because Prince Hamlet's father, King Hamlet, had killed King Fortinbras in battle. And so you've got your two foils, Laertes and Fortinbras. So that's a possible research paper if you want to talk about how those two characters are foils for Hamlet. The ghost, this is another character. This is the specter or the phantasm of Hamlet's recently deceased father, and he claims to have been murdered by his brother. And so he wants Hamlet to avenge him. So once you have a brother killing a brother, you've got this whole biblical parallel going on with Cain and Abel. So there's always that kind of retribution going to happen. It's very interesting. Shakespeare sneaks some interesting undertones in his plays. So we've got madness, we've got a brother killing a brother, we've got people who behave rationally, people who don't. There's a lot of things going on in the play. And some more about the ghost. We're not really sure if the ghost is what it appears to be, because in this day and age, ghosts could have been sent by the devil. So Hamlet has this question, is it a ghost trying to tempt me, or is it actually my dad? And he has to figure out, half part of the play he spends trying to figure out, can I believe what the ghost says or not? And so part of what he does, part of his delay of his what is going to occur in the play, is that he's trying to find out if the ghost is telling the truth. And so he spends, 2 or 3 acts trying to get that settled. Rosencrantz and Guildenstern. Do y'all know what that is? Anybody tell me what that little graphic is?
The guillotine.
Yeah, it's a guillotine. Rosencrantz and Guildenstern are buddies of Hamlet's from college, and they are called to come to the court by Claudius because of Hamlet's behavior. And they're not the smartest light bulbs in the, up in the outlet or whatever, but they agree to do it. And so these are these really Hamlet's friends if they're willing to spy on him and tell the king and queen what they find out about him. So there's an interesting underlying story. And this was so intriguing that there is actually a play called, and a movie was made of it, Rosencrantz and Guildenstern Are Dead. That should give you a clue what happens to Rosencrantz and Guildenstern in this play. They just managed not to get things done well, and they end up dead. And so the particular version I saw, they spend the entire play, like every 2 or 3 minutes, it feels like, they're flipping a coin, and it's the random acts of chance that are brought into it. All right, so themes in the play. There's those fundamental universal ideas explored in a literary work. It's a lesson about life. That's basically what that says. One of the themes is certainty. What separates Hamlet from other revenge plays, and that is what this is about, is that the action we expect to see, particularly from Hamlet, oh gosh, that would have been Shakespeare's son was Hamlet, by the way. It's postponed while he tries to come up with that knowledge that what he's doing is right. It poses many questions that other plays would take for granted. Your dad's dead, the ghost told you somebody else did it, you should go get your revenge. But then we wouldn't have 5 acts. Questions are an issue. Can we have certain knowledge about ghosts? Do any of you believe in ghosts? If you believe in ghosts, raise your hand. Oh, I see. Really? Have y'all ever seen one? Lorenzo, a bunch of you have your hands up. Is there a reason you believe in ghosts? I mean, is there a local ghost that haunts Lorenzo or something, or? Yeah? Okay. You just feel like there is, it depends on a lot of students, I've had students who've had who have relatives who were witches, and as a result, because they believe this person was a witch, they also believe in ghosts. But let's go back to that. Can you trust what a ghost says? Is the knowledge it's giving you? Or is the ghost maybe even confused? Is it friendly? Is it bad? Normally in contemporary movies, unless you're watching Casper, the ghost is a bad guy. Here's some more questions. How can we know for certain the facts about a crime that has no witnesses? And that's one of those, unless you can come up with the body and evidence that proves that an individual did it, how can you know when there's no witnesses? How can Hamlet know the state of Claudius' soul by watching his behavior? That's going to be one of the issues. Can Claudius or the audience know the state of Hamlet's mind by observing his behavior? Can we really tell by our observations what somebody is thinking and feeling? Are they truly crazy? Remember, Richard Corey. We can't tell just from the way somebody acts what's going on in their minds. We have to be careful about that. And can we know whether our actions will have the actual consequences we want them to have? And is there an afterlife? That's one of the things that comes out in this. Uncertainty. Many people have seen this play as one of indecisiveness. It's Hamlet's refusing to act. It might be more interesting if we think about it as a play that shows how uncertain our lives are. How many things that we don't know that we take for granted when people act or when they evaluate one another's actions. I don't know if I want to write about uncertainty, though. The theme of action, here we go. Directly related to the theme of certainty is the theme of action. How is it possible to take reasonable, effective, and purposeful action? In Hamlet, the question of how to act is affected not only by rational considerations, such as the need for certainty, but also by emotional, ethical, and psychological factors. And that's interesting because, he writes this at 1600. Psychology hasn't even been developed. It's not developed for another 250, 275 years. Acting recklessly. Hamlet appears to distrust the idea of if it's possible to act in a controlled, purposeful way. When he does act, he acts blindly, and bad things happen. Because he thinks too much about the action may be part of the problem. Others think about less of it, and they aren't troubled about all the possible repercussions. They simply act as they feel appropriate, but in some sense they prove Hamlet is right because all of their actions miscarry. And this is the tragedy of Hamlet, which means just basically by the end of the play, all the central characters are dead. It's not a happy story. It's one of those you'd like to rewrite, and you can't. Acting foolishly. Claudius possesses himself of a queen and a crown through bold and reckless action, but his conscience does torment him a little bit, and he is constantly beset by threats to his authority, and he dies. Laertes resolves that nothing will distract him from acting out his revenge, but he is easily influenced by Claudius and manipulated by him to help Claudius achieve his own purpose. And death, that's definitely an issue in this one. In the aftermath of his father's murder, Hamlet is obsessed with the idea of the death. One of his most famous speeches is in the play, the to be or not to be, that is the question. That is where he contemplates suicide. But then, as he's contemplating suicide, he's not really sure that he can actually do anything, will that be better? It might be worse. So the aftermath of death, that's the whole notion. And that's the ghost reinforces this. What happens to you after you die? And we see some physical remainders. One of the most famous scenes in Hamlet that you see a lot of pictures of is Hamlet, and he's talking to the skull of a dead man who turns out to be the court jester from when Hamlet was young, Yorick. And he says, alas, poor Yorick, I knew him well, who was a man of infinite jest and wisdom, or something along those lines. And so he's constantly questioning what happens after death. And it's, you know, which goes along with the whole emo kind of issue. All right? And truth and trying to figure out what's true in an ambiguous world is a definite problem. So revenge. This is a play of revenge, and I do have some notes about revenge on another page later on. I don't know why toxic acid is there, but it'll work. Since death is both the cause and the consequence of revenge, and remember the cask of Amontillado. It's all kind of comes together as this theme of revenge and justice. Claudius's murder of King Hamlet instigates Hamlet's quest for revenge, and Claudius' death is the end of that quest. And along the way, a lot of other people die. Suicide. The question of his own death also plagues Hamlet as well. He repeatedly contemplates whether or not suicide is a legitimate answer or a legitimate course of action in this world. His grief and misery are such that he frequently longs for it, but he fears that if he commits suicide, he will go into internal suffering because Christians are not supposed to commit suicide. And to be or not to be, there it is. Oh, heavens. It concludes that no one would choose to endure the pain of life if he or she were not afraid of what will come after that. And that is with the fears which causes complex moral considerations to interfere with the capacity for action. There are motifs. These are repeated words, phrases, ideas within the play. And they can help to develop and inform the major themes. And so one of those is going to be the motif of misogyny. Big fancy word. Basically, that's this like of the female. Shattered by his mother's quick remarriage to Claudius so soon after his dad's death, Hamlet becomes cynical, neurotic about women in general, shows a particular obsession with what he appears to be a connection between female sexuality and moral corruption. Though why it's only put on the woman and not on the man, I don't understand. Frailty, thy name is woman. It's one of the quotes from the play. It occurs only sporadically, but it is important because it does influence Hamlet's behavior towards Ophelia and Gertrude. He urges Ophelia to go to a nunnery rather than experience the corruption of sexuality, and exclaims of Gertrude, frailty, thy name is woman. You're just not a strong enough sex to withstand the passion that you feel. You have ears and hearing. In this play, people are constantly spying on each other. Hamlet's spying on Claudius and all of his people, and obviously Claudius, Polonius, Rosencrantz, and Guildenstern are spying on Hamlet, trying to figure out exactly what's happening, what's the truth. So it becomes interesting. And they play it up in the movie version we're going to watch with Mel Gibson's version of it. It's not his version, he's just the star. Let me phrase it that way. Words are used to communicate ideas, but they can also distort the truth. They can manipulate people. They are, in essence, a way to corrupt individuals and to gain power. All you have to do is watch political campaigns to see that. And Claudius is a great man at manipulating language to enhance his own power. The use of words goes along with that. The sinister uses of words are represented by images of ears and hearing, because actually how Claudius kills his brother is by pouring poison in his ear. So right there, we can literally see the act of killing your brother then becomes symbolic of how we poison individuals by the words we say. We all know gossip is not good, but we do it. But what is gossip except poison that comes from our mouths and enters in another person's ears, and then it colors our perceptions of whoever the gossip was about. So there's this whole kind of interesting thing going on. And that might be an interesting topic to look at, is the manipulation of words in the play. We can see that there's actually an interesting phrase that's used early in the play by the ghost, declaring that the story that he was killed by a snake is a lie. He says that the whole ear of Denmark is rankly abused. And frequently, the king or the queen of a country their body would be representative of their nation. So that's kind of, by saying the whole year of Denmark, that's kind of a neat thing to do. There are symbols in the play. Symbols are objects, remember, figures, characters, colors, whatever. They represent abstract ideas or concepts. So, Yorick's skull. One important exception is the skull. It says there's not a lot of symbols, but this is one. This skull, that he said, that's that obvious representation of death and what happens to us after we die. Is kind of cool. Because, you know, after you die, this is what it is. And Denmark, and, you know, countries that are farther north than we are, their ground freezes in the winter, so it's hard to bury an individual in the winter. You kind of have to store them until the ground is unfrozen and you can dig into it. So, and there wouldn't be a lot of space to use for graves, so you would just reuse graves. And that's one reason why they come up with the skull of Yorick. At a timely scene in Act 4. Oh, sorry, at the beginning of Act 5. Different aspects of death. That, as he speaks to this skull, Yorick, it becomes a symbol of several different aspects of death. The inevitability, we're all going to die, and the disintegration of the body, which is kind of disgusting. He urges the skull to get you to my lady's chamber and tell her, let her paint an inch thick to this favor, she must come. No one can avoid it. He also traces the skull's mouth and actually says, here hung those lips that I have kissed, I know not how oft, indicating his fascination with the physical consequences of death. He was a small child and he liked the jester. The decay of the human body goes along with that. He frequently comments, Hamlet does, referring to every human's body eventual decay, noting that Polonius will be eaten by worms, that the dust from the decayed body of Alexander the Great might be used to stop up a barrel hole, that when your body breaks down, it's eaten by the worms are then eaten by the fishes, the beggar catches the fish and then eats that fish. So as a result, the king has been eaten by the beggar. It's this whole kind of bleak notion of what happens. Thank heavens we're either cremated or our bodies are in coffins and the worms don't quite get to them like that. We're not going to be fed to the fishes and nothing else. And that's the end, okay? So you can see there's a lot going on there. I do have something that you're going to have to take today. This is a quiz that I would like you to take over trifles. I'm kind of struck by sometimes I don't feel like I'm having a whole lot of attention paid. So it might help, you know, just if you look up occasionally when I'm talking, I kind of feel like I'm ignored a lot. And that might be a reason why we're not doing as well as we can on some of our stuff. But there is a quiz on trifles that you can take now, okay? And that's all I've got for today. Good luck. We went over a lot of the stuff. We talked about it at the end of class, okay? So it's not anything surprising. And there's not, on a couple of them, there's not just one single answer. There's multiple answers that will work. Writing the comparison and contrast essay.
Miss Thompson,
Mm-hmm.
this is Rissa from your online class.
And Danae as well.
And Danae. We were going to ask about the thesis that you want us to turn in.
Where are you? Oh, okay. This is Woman Union. Okay. Yeah, you know, that's the thesis in the blog. You caught me off guard. I have to switch now to 2333. Hold on. Have you been able to find the blog?
No.
Okay. Let me go into that real quick, okay? Let's see. It's kind of tucked away a little bit. It's in the research paper folder in the Romanticism unit, okay? So go into Romanticism. And of course mine doesn't look like yours, does it? Here, I'll turn it off of edit mode. Okay. Go into research paper. and let me see, what's the best way to go? Okay, there's all the possible topics, right? Have you decided on a topic yet?
I decided on the Paradise Lost within Frankenstein.
Okay,
I think I'm gonna do the role of women one.
okay, good. So
Ms.
if you click
Thompson?
through, have you found this part right here? Research paper, thesis blog. You can open research paper, thesis blog here. So where it says click to launch, it'll be on the 4th page. And you just go, you hit comment. And then you write in your thesis there, okay?
Awesome. Thank you.
It's good that you guys are sitting in the room while we're doing this, okay? And then once you type it in, you know, I have to switch over to Frankenstein, you know, it's a whole different thought going on in process in my mind. Well, how stuff I go. I can't italicize in this thing. Frankenstein. I'm trying to think. Uses, I'm just sitting here trying to think of one. It helps if I put a K in there. I'm sitting here trying to think of the thesis statements.
Ms. Thompson?
And then fill it in from there.
We're wondering if the Trifles quiz, if you'd posted that yet, because we can't find it on our Blackboard.
I sent it to the facilitators. They didn't copy it for y'all?
Our facilitator, she's sick still, so she
Okay,
hasn't been
I'll
here.
tell you what. Right now, I'll put it in. I'll just put it in and as an assignment, okay? And I'll give you about 30 minutes to do it. Will that give you enough time?
Yes.
Now, which school is going to be doing it? Did the others get it copied? Or who didn't get it copied? Which school is that?
Lorenzo?
Lorenzo didn't get it? Smire, you have it?
Copy of it either. We didn't get a copy of it either.
Okay, let me put it in then. Okay, well, it happens.
Miss Thompson, did
Yeah?
you just want thesis, or did you want the introduction with a thesis into it?
No, just give me a thesis. That way I've got an idea what you guys are doing, okay?
Okay, thank you.
Okay, whoa. I gotta turn it off of. Here we go. All right, I will go into drama and I will add the assignment and I can put it in there. It'll be an assignment in drama, and I'll just call it Trifles Quiz, okay?
Okay, thank you.
You have to give me a couple minutes. If I can access the documents. Here, I'll just type it in this way. I've got copies sitting here in my hands.
All right, thank you, Ms. Thompson. We'll
Okay.
see you.
All right, see you Monday. And I'll leave it open for a couple hours today.
Do we have Connect assignments Friday?
Yes, there is a Connect assignment. It's a short one. It's the one over MLA to get you guys ready because you're going to have to be doing a research paper on this one.
Okay, thank you.
Oh, gosh. Here, my typing is going horrible. Apologize. Okay. All right, just about have it in. Okay. That was interesting. Well, that messed me around, didn't it? Now,